Don't. You're sitting still, bro. Don't do it. Don't do it. Get the right. Hey. Don't.
I'll tease you. I'll tease you. I just shot him.
Members of the jury, there is no do-over when you walk the streets with a loaded firearm. When you're entrusted with a deadly weapon as part of your job, there's no do-over when you take a young man's life. Now, this was exactly what she had been trained for years to prevent. But on April 11th, she betrayed her badge and she failed Daunte Wright. Now, after the defendant shot him, Daunte Wright's car traveled about a block down the street. It crossed the median and it hit another vehicle that was traveling in the opposite direction. And you'll hear from Patricia Lundgren, who was driving that other vehicle. She and her husband were coming down the road when they were hit by Daunte Wright's car. And you'll also hear from Elena Albrecht Payton, the passenger who was riding with Daunte Wright. And she'll tell you about the crash and the injuries she suffered. Now, you'll also see and hear about the fact that after the defendant shot Daunte Wright and the car crashed a block away, she didn't do anything to help him. She didn't call for assistance. She didn't render aid. She didn't communicate any information about what had happened to her fellow officers who were responding. And when they showed up down the block, they didn't know that Daunte had been shot. Daunte Wright had been shot. They didn't know that the defendant had shot him. And they didn't know what they were dealing with at all. So almost 10 minutes later, a small army of officers approach with guns drawn and drag Daunte Wright's dead body out of the car at gunpoint. And the defendant did nothing. You'll also hear from paramedics that Daunte Wright was declared dead on scene. And then the BCA arrived to investigate the matter. And the medical examiner's office came and they collected the body. There was no bringing him back. You'll hear from the medical examiner, the assistant medical examiner in this case, who conducted the autopsy, Dr. Jackson. And he'll tell you about his examination, his autopsy procedure, and his findings in this case. And you'll see photos of Daunte Wright's injuries. And you'll see that gunshot wound that tore through his heart. Dr. Jackson will also tell you that he recovered a projectile from Daunte Wright's body, the bullet, after it ripped through his insides and got lodged in his chest wall. And he'll describe for you the condition that it was in, that peeling back of that metal, and how that's consistent with a hollow point bullet. And he'll also tell you about his findings on cause and manner of death. The cause of Mr. Wright's death was a gunshot wound to the chest, and the manner of Mr. Wright's death was homicide. You'll also hear from a use of force expert in this case who will tell you about the use of the weapons at issue here. And he'll tell you that it was objectively unreasonable for the defendant to use her firearm. And he'll tell you that even the use of the taser would have been unwise under these circumstances. Members of the jury, I'd like to take a moment to discuss what this case is not about. It's not about intent to kill. That's not why you're here today.
Objection argumentative.
No objection is overruled. You may.
Thank you, Your Honor. The judge will give you the law, and she'll give you instructions on the law to apply at the end of this case. But intent is not an element of any of the charges at issue here, and it's not something that the state will have to prove. That the defendant didn't intend to kill Mr. Wright or that she didn't mean to shoot him with her gun, if you hear those things, they have nothing to do with the charges at hand. Indeed, if the defendant had meant to do these things, if she had meant to shoot her gun into Daunte Wright's body, we would be talking about intentional murder and not the charges at hand. And that's not the case you have before you. The defendant is not charged with intentional murder. No one will say that she wanted him dead. No one will say that she wanted this to happen. And no one is even saying that she meant to shoot him with her gun. But the evidence will show that's what she did. She fired her gun at point-blank range into Daunte Wright's chest. She unholstered her weapon. She drew it. She aimed it. She pointed it directly at Daunte Wright. And she pulled the trigger and she shot him in the chest. And she did those things without bothering to confirm what was in her hand. Firing a weapon, blindly assuming it to be a taser, after drawing the wrong weapon from the wrong side. She did all those things with a gun. That's what she actually did. A gun loaded with hollow point bullets. The kind that expand on impact. The kind that tear up someone's insides. She did this with a firearm that she was issued, that was part of her job, that she was entrusted to carry in the course of her duties, to serve and protect. So as a result of all of this, the state has charged 2 crimes. First-degree manslaughter and second-degree manslaughter. And again, the law you will apply will come from the judge at the end of this case. But these charges are in the realm of recklessness and culpable negligence. Those terms will be defined for you by the court later. But the law in Minnesota criminalizes all kinds of reckless conduct. Things like reckless driving, reckless child endangerment, reckless handling of a firearm, and in certain cases, manslaughter. And that is what this case is about. It's about the reckless handling of a firearm, and it's about the disregard of known risks. It's about an officer who knew she could kill someone if she got it wrong, but she failed to make sure she got it right. You may also hear at some point during this case, this incident might be described as an unfortunate mistake or a tragic accident. Or that because the defendant didn't know she had a gun in her hand, that this should be called an accident and not a crime. And again, the law you will apply will come from the judge. Those are the instructions that you will follow. But that's simply not the case.
Counsel,
Members of the jury.
please stick to the facts. Okay.
This case is also not about Daunte Wright. Daunte Wright.
This is argument, I object. She's given her opening statement, now she's arguing her case.
I'd like you to just stick with a bird's eye view of the facts that you think will go in and no argument, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. You'll hear about the training. You'll hear about the policies. There will be evidence of all of those things presented in this case. And I'm going to highlight some of those things for you. The defendant's history of training over a 26-year period as a Brooklyn Center police officer will be evidence in this case that you will have to consider in the connection with the charges at issue. Now, over the course of her career, the defendant received extensive training on a variety of topics. Year in and year out. She had training on firearms, training on tasers, training on use of force, and that included all types of things. Readiness to use force, scenario-based training. So real-life type situations where you have to react under stress, choose the right type of weapon, choose the appropriate response. She was trained to do all this under stressful conditions. She was also trained to maintain calm, manage stress, and make those decisions in the moment, out on the street. But the evidence will show that she flouted her training and she flouted policy. I'm going to give you a highlight of some of those policies and trainings. Now, when it comes to firearms, she was required to successfully complete training on her firearm every year. She had to be requalified, in addition to the quarterly training she received. And she was also instructed by policy that she should not unnecessarily display or handle any firearm. That's part of the policy. The use of force policy instructs officers they shall only use the amount of force that reasonably appears necessary in a particular situation. There's also policy on moving vehicles and how officers should use or not use their firearms in those situations. And that policy indicates that an officer should only discharge a firearm at a moving vehicle or its occupants if deadly force other than the vehicle is directed at the officers or others. Policy also says that officers should not utilize firearms during an ongoing pursuit unless the conditions and circumstances meet the requirements for deadly force. There's also policy on de-escalation, that officers should use non-violent strategies and techniques to decrease the intensity of a situation, to improve decision-making, to improve communication, and to reduce the need for force. Now, in addition to training on policy and training on firearms and use of force, you'll hear about policy on tasers. And the policy on tasers for Brooklyn Center is known as conducted energy device policy. And policy says that the purpose of the taser is to control violent suspects as opposed to fleeing suspects. And that appropriate use should result in fewer serious injuries to both officers and suspects. And you will see that mere flight from a pursuing officer is not good cause for the use of a taser. And you will also learn that Brooklyn Center policy says that the use of a taser should be avoided where collateral injury might result. Collateral injury, meaning someone else could get hurt or killed. And that includes on individuals who are operating vehicles. You'll also hear that tasers require training as well in order to carry them. That in order to carry a taser, officers have to complete successfully their department training. Now you'll learn that policy also dictates how those should be carried in a reaction side holster. Again, that's the non-dominant side, on the opposite side of the duty weapon. It also requires that those items be distinctly marked, that they look different, and that officers should not hold them both at the same time. And we'll talk about some of those differences, and you'll hear about them during the course of the trial. Now, you'll see in this picture the defendant's taser, Taser 7, up top in yellow, and the Glock 9mm handgun pictured at the bottom. And you'll hear about the differences between these two items. The color, for one, well, it sounds like stating the obvious perhaps. The taser is bright yellow, the Glock is black. The differences in weight you will learn about. Now, the taser weighs 0.94 pounds, and the Glock, the firearm, when loaded with 17 rounds of ammunition, it weighs 2.11 pounds. That's more than twice as much. Now, you'll also hear about the differences in safety and the display and the laser that comes on the taser and the holster location. And I'll talk about those things too. Now, when it comes to the safety, a safety is just a mechanism or a button of some kind, a switch in some cases, that makes a weapon inoperable. And the Taser 7 has a safety on the side that you have to flip up right there in order to arm the device. It has to be engaged. And the Glock, the firearm, has no safety switch like that. It has a trigger safety. So basically, you pull the trigger on the Glock and it fires. Now, when it comes to the display, well, when you flip up the safety on a taser, it arms the device. It means it's ready to use. And when you do that, when that switch is lifted up, three things happen. A display screen comes on the back of the taser. Green and red laser lights appear coming out of the front of the taser, and they appear on the target that you're aiming at. And the flashlight also turns on. And that display screen is pictured here on the back of the taser. It faces the operator who's holding it. The person holding the taser sees this display screen when it's on. And the lasers, the top laser comes out of the top cartridge, a green laser light that appears on the target, showing where that top prong would deploy. And depending on which cartridge you're using, one of two red laser lights appears. There's a green light and a red light that appear on the target when you aim the taser after it's been armed. Now, you'll also see for yourselves and hear about the defendant's duty belt that holds her gun and her taser holsters. Now, on the right of the screen is the taser in its holster. The taser holster is made of plastic. It has a latch right here that has to be depressed. You have to push down on a button to release the taser from its holster. You press down on that button and then rock the taser backward. The taser has to lean back, rock back, to be pulled up and out of the holster. Now, the firearm holster, which is on the left side here, empty in this photograph, is made of a soft leather-like material, and it has a snap that just releases and the gun comes straight out. Now, as you saw before, taser and firearms have to be holstered in different ways pursuant to policy. The policy requires that the taser be carried on the reaction side, the non-dominant side. And the firearm, the gun, is carried on the dominant side. In this case, the defendant's right hand side is where she kept her gun. Her left side is where she kept her taser. Now, you'll hear about that requirement. The policy requires that officers carry those weapons on separate sides of their body. Officers are given a choice when it comes to how those tasers are positioned on their non-dominant side. Now, the choice is a cross draw or a straight draw. Now for a cross draw, the officers use their right hand, reach over the body with the right hand to pull out the taser. In that situation, as pictured in the top here, the butt of the grip points forward to make that cross motion so that the officer would pull that taser with that right hand in a case as pictured here. Now, the defendant had her holster set up in a straight draw. The added protection of having the taser come out with her left hand. When a taser is positioned on the left side of the body in a straight draw, the butt of the gun points backward, and the officer has to rock the taser out and pull it up with the left hand. Straight draw taser is to be drawn with the left hand. The defendant had her duty belt and her holsters positioned so that she would have to draw her taser with her left hand. Now, the defendant had chosen this setup and this additional protection in the way that she carried, and she had done this consistently for years, and you'll see evidence of that. She carried in a straight draw position in 2016, left side straight draw. 2017, left side straight draw. 2018, left side straight draw. 2019, left side straight draw. 2020, again, left side straight draw, including April 11th of this year, left side straight draw. She had her taser positioned on her left side, as required by policy, with the added protection of straight draw, pulling it with her left hand. Her Glock, her firearm, again, by policy, on the right side of her duty belt. So the only weapon she draws with her right hand is her gun, not her taser. You'll hear about policy on targeting when it comes to the taser as well. Policy says that officers should target lower center mass, but they should avoid the head, the neck, the chest, and the groin, sensitive areas of the body. And you'll also hear about taser training and how the policy requires training, and you'll hear about the training that they go through as well. But the training is required to include performing reaction hand draws or cross draws, which is not applicable to her, to reduce the possibility of accidentally drawing and firing a firearm. Policy requires that when they are trained, they practice. They practice drawing that taser with that left hand with the straight draw. It's required by policy. You'll see some of those records, the records of the defendant's training. Every year she received classroom training, hands-on training, and instruction, practice on this taser, on the tasers that she was issued, and that included the recent certification. In 2015, she was trained and certified. In 2016, she was trained and certified. In 2017 and 2018, she was trained and certified. And in addition, she had to acknowledge that she had received the product warnings and that she had understood those warnings at the time that she was recertified on her taser. And she acknowledged receiving them every year she was trained. This is 2019 and 2020, and you'll see those records. And again, in that most recent training, March 2nd, 2021, she once again acknowledged receiving and understanding those product warnings. Now these trainings, like the one on March 2nd, also include reviewing the PowerPoint presentations, demonstrating safe handling, performing de-escalation arcs, basically being able to use these tasers in safe ways. And again, on March 2nd, 2021, she indicated that she understood and received the warnings, the Axon product warning. Axon is just the parent company for Taser. She understood those warnings. And what did those warnings say? They said, confusing a handgun with a CEW, a taser, could result in death or serious injury. Learn the differences in the physical feel and holstering characteristics between your CEW, taser, and your handgun to help avoid confusion. Always follow your agency's guidance and training. And those PowerPoints and that training that she went through continue to remind officers of those risks. Those PowerPoints that she had to sit through to be certified every year included that tasers are not risk-free. They can cause death or serious injury. The PowerPoints themselves set forth that the course attendees, the officers, had to acknowledge that they had read and understood that taser warning that you just saw. They included that tasers are serious weapons and should be treated as such. This was all part of the training. And over the years, they also talked about the benefits and the risks with respect to the way that you carry your taser. And they specifically had in their training that the benefits of carrying a taser on the non-dominant side had associated issues. That includes, let me rephrase. If you carry your taser on the dominant side, if you're right-handed and you carry your taser on the dominant side, they had instructed their trainees, there's a higher risk of weapon confusion. They talked about the risk of weapon confusion in those trainings. They explained that there were known incidents of shootings by mistaken weapon confusion. This was part of the training going back at least as early as 2016. They trained that you could kill someone, and there were incidents of shootings when you made the mistake and pulled the wrong weapon. And so they explained why it makes sense to carry your taser on the other side of your body. And they direct officers to refer to your department's tactical experts and make your own policy on how to carry, holster, and deploy. They instructed about the known risks. Those risks also included instruction on risks of injury to people operating vehicles or machinery, and risks if someone is tased in the heart or chest area. Those trainings also included smart use considerations. And those smart use considerations explain that if there's no immediate safety risk, slow down and consider alternative force options. And they explain that physical resistance alone does not equal an immediate safety risk. The training materials themselves tell you to reevaluate. The training materials also tell officers to be aware, to be careful, and to be aware of stress and how stress can influence these situations. And they instruct that officers have been accused of using excessive taser exposures due to stress or distractions. Be alert and avoid potential distractions. This is part of the training. And they talk about where to target, where you should aim the taser if you're using it. The trainings say to target the back, that the back is the most preferred target area. And that's because it contains larger muscle groups and reduces the risk of hitting sensitive body areas. And it tells you on the front, you should, if you have to, tase at the front, tase below the chest, split the belt line, increase that distance between those probes so you don't tase near the heart and you don't tase the chest. And the reason for that is there are cardiac risks associated with tasing someone in the chest. So the training materials say, target the back, avoid the chest, avoid the heart region. And the taser training materials also say that historically, over time, these deployments have been most effective from 7 to 15 feet away. Use this distance where you can to have a higher hit probability, good probe spread, if you want these items to be effective and to achieve that neuromuscular incapacitation. Because they may not work if you don't have the appropriate distance between your probes. The taser training materials also talk about a spark or functionality test. The training materials say that a full 5-second spark or functionality test should be conducted once every 24 hours. That's in the training materials. It's also in the policy. And you'll hear evidence that the defendant failed to spark test her taser for the 2 days prior to this incident. You'll hear that she didn't do that, even though it was required by policy. And even these slides on spark testing explain that you should be aware of potential stress. And over again, throughout the years, every time she's seeing these slides, she's seeing that the tasers are not risk-free. That repeated messaging, big letters, read the warnings, understand them. Understand that tasers can cause death or serious injury. Understand the risks of weapons confusion. But the defendant, the evidence will show that the defendant flouted that training and she disregarded her fundamental duty to safeguard life. I killed a boy. I killed a boy. Those were the defendant's words. That's what she said after she did what she did. On April 11th of this year, the defendant shot and killed Daunte Wright, a 20-year-old who had an air freshener hanging from his rearview mirror. A kid in a Heartbreaker jean jacket. But on April 11th of this year, Daunte Wright was not the heartbreaker. It was Daunte Wright who had his heart broken. And it was the defendant who broke Daunte Wright's heart when she fired a hollow point bullet straight into his chest. Thank you.
Okay, members of the